You do not trade, and that is a shield. Okay? Shield is a symbol of a young boy in reaching puberty, middle or later teenage years. He receives this cut in becoming a man. That's when you receive your shield. Okay? Now, folks, fruits and nuts, seafood, fruits and nuts, red meat, migrating around the land. Now, exercising. Well, of course, exercising along the coast, a lot of swimming. Using their dugout canoes, as you would have seen in the film, paddling. So you can expect our ancestors, folks, along the coast, big arms. What about the legs? Lean legs or stockier legs? What do you reckon? Stocky. Why? Well, folks, look at a lot of sports people today. They're running on fine sand at the beach, coarse sand at the fresh river, up in their sand dunes to strengthen their leg muscles. You've travelled from here to Port Douglas, took you 3/4 an hour. Think of them walking along that coast daily, trotting, running, plenty of arm and leg exercise. Yet our dry cleaning groups, you're up in the mountains, no cars, no guns. You had to run and chase those animals. When you migrated down the coast, you would have done a lot of swimming, running on sand as well. Not quite sure, folks, just with our life expectancy prior to Australia being colonised, and it's only going off our rock art gallery, there was no known documentation, but our life expectancy today of Aboriginal males is 45 to 55 years of age. Females are 10 years longer. But I'd just like to reflect on my grandfather telling me about my great-grandfather. Now, you would have seen the documentary. Folks, my grandfather was in that documentary. He's had the baker's hat on. Okay? It's a pretty big man. He lived to the mid-80s. My granddad, my great-grandfather, to the early 90s. And they were over 6 feet tall. My dad, well, he's 70 years of age. He's shorter than me. I don't know where the hell we come from. Our great-grandfathers and such. But I just like to open some positive thoughts, folks, with our life expectancy can go on the increase. Why? A lot of our Indigenous people around Australia are going to university, okay, joining the medical profession, gaining their tertiary qualification as being nurses or doctors, so they can go back to these isolated communities and teach their people how to live a healthy lifestyle. A lot are going into sports because they are so naturally talented. Not playing one sport, say on a Saturday, some of them even play a different sport on Sunday, and even midweek if they could fit it in and play different sports altogether. So look at the medical profession and sports. Medical profession teaches you to live a healthy lifestyle. Sports, if you want to become the elite, you have to exercise regularly. I'd like to reflect back on our ancestors, folks. They did exactly that. Okay. Now, seeing that I've spoken a lot about the wet and dry cleaning groups, why did we have wet and dry cleaning groups? Well, folks, it had a lot to do with our marrying laws. We had two types of marriages. First one is so common around Australia is the promised arranged marriage at birth, where the age of the male would vary. So, for example, in Central Desert, Uluru, male there around 28, 30, 35 years of age, marrying girls just reaching puberty or their first menstrual cycle. Northern Territory, 45, 55 years of age, then older still. Jamagai tribe along the coast here, folks, my wife would be about 5 to 10 years younger than me. And it's why, folks? Because young girls and boys of similar age, females, are more advanced than males. Okay? But how does it actually work? The promised and arranged marriage at birth. It's like this. Imagine, now my mum did not actually come from the wet, but imagine if she did. She's from the wet, marries my dad, the female follows the male. So she comes up here to live. Us, the children, would belong to the father's side. I would mostly always live here unless I migrate, yet my two sisters, they would mostly live in the wet clan group because they've got to marry wet clan husbands and such. But before I'm born, find a wife for me is mostly my maternal grandparents living along the coast. Remember, they're in one wet clan, and the other one further up to Port Douglas. As they would roam up and down the coast, they would look for not one family to marry into, but they could go and talk to about 3, 4, 5 different families. Just imagine them only choosing one. Hey, g'day, would you like to marry into our family? No dice. No, they might not like it, my family, and such. So you look at the genetics, skills, characteristics, personalities and such. Mind you, my paternal grandparents, they would also know the family. Why? Over the years they've migrated around, they would also know them as well. So what would happen is, in choosing one of those families, both grandparents, maternal and paternal, sit in council and go and speak to the grandparents and mums and dads, and our mums and dads, and say, right, how would you like to marry into our family? Fine. Not even born yet, but when I am, if a young girl is born the same year, she would not become my promised wife. They would wait a few more years. When that happens, they would get in council again. Because my maternal grandparents did the majority of talking and liaison with them down there, it is my paternal grandfather that speaks up in council and say, we have a grandson, you have a granddaughter, can they both be promised a birth and marriage? Folks, over the years as I migrated around the land and learned the various skills, I would meet up with her around 8, 9, 10 years of age. Imagine, maternal grandparents down here, come here boy, this big family, they're all your in-laws and that young girl is going to become your promised wife. I'm thinking, yes. What's a wife? Yeah. She's my friend. Think like such. So folks, when I did this cut, that's when I would marry you. And that vice versa, you would marry me. Otherwise it becomes a punishable offence, which I'll tell you very shortly what that punishment is. First marriage, promised arranged marriage first. Second one is so simple. I personally call it the handing down of marriage. Are we all familiar with the hand-me-downs? My brother dies, I take on my sister-in-law as a second wife. Now I'm talking about yesteryear, not today. I only got 2 pockets, but they don't go as deep. Okay? Yes, my wife find out, she'll shoot me. But why do I take on my sister-in-law as a second wife? She originally came from the Mat. She's in my dry clan. We've got 2 others. Are there any men that is available to her? There are 2 types, married or single. Well, the married men, she can't, due to cause conflict and jealousy. Can she have a relationship with any of the single men? Those single men are already promised to their first wife. She's got no choice, I'm it. And by the way, folks, she isn't second in order. You would end up with jealousy and conflict. She's equal. Young girls are taught by their grandmothers, mums and aunties, you would respect your husband's second or third or fourth wives. Talking about third or fourth, my dad had an older brother. He passed on now, my uncle, 7 sons in the family. Imagine if one of the sons passes on, anyone, have a guess, whom does that girl go to out of the surviving sons?
The eldest.
The eldest, yes. You would have 6 sons where one would have 2 wives. Okay, what would happen if the reverse happened? Say tribal warfare broke out, 6 sons died and wasn't left living.
He gets them all.
He'd have big problems. So that's our marrying laws, folks. Now, reaching the stage of marriage. When I am born, I am looked after by my paternal grandmother, my mum, a lot of my aunties. Whom is in charge of me? Grandma. She overrules mum. Okay. Prior to me being born, though, they would go around to the dry clan which we live in, and the other 2, and seek out young teenage girls and asking their grandmothers, their mums, can your teenage girl, that teenage girl coming up us, they would go to other families, can that senior female, they're around 30, 35, 40 years of age, coming up us? Excuse me. Of course, if these senior ones didn't have children, why? The senior ones are to act like matrons to the young teenage girls, where they would take them out and teach them how to do the shopping, fresh fruits, yams, nuts, berries, best vitamins, nutritions and such. Bring it back to our own. They're responsible in looking after. Folks, if we look at the similarities of yesteryear with these senior females, these young teenage girls, mothers who go into hospital these days and have babies, press a button, who comes running? Well, no one, but young nurses, right? Senior females, be it the matrons, midwives, and doctors, made sure they did their job. Similar to back then. Of course, as these young teenage girls got on in age, they would take and learn new skills. Up and coming young teenage girls would take over. So, after we are weaned, able to acknowledge and understand things, this is when our grandparents will teach us the basics of our bush foods in medicine. They will take us up into the rock art gallery and explain in detail about our art, because after all, art is a written language of ours. But going back through the rainforest, we do have a lot of poisonous plants, toxic nuts, not to mention one of the most deadliest snakes in the world, which is our taipan. It's up there with the best of it, folks. One bite from the taipan, you've got a few minutes to live. That's why when we go out in the bush these days, we take out these things. Okay? Yes. And examples of them walking throughout the rainforest, folks, grandparents, they would say to the grandchildren, you can touch this leaf, rub it onto your chest, your forehead, lemon myrtle. Now this rough leaf, very careful with that. Do not rub it, okay? And that's it, you make an abrasion and such. But this nut you dare not touch. This fruit, peel the skin, eat it, no worries. Can you imagine when they came to say a fruit or a plant you did not touch? The grandchild or grandchildren are going to say, Grandma, Granddad, why can't we touch that one, or why can't we touch this one? Grandparents, wasn't because of their ignorance, they continuously move on to something like the leaves that was useful, or the fruits and nuts that were edible. Can you imagine if they explained to the grandchildren about the finger cherry? Now folks, this finger cherry, once again, my personal opinion, with researching, I class the finger cherry as the most dangerous fruit in North Queensland, right throughout Australia as far as I know, and even, I reckon it's up there with the best of them throughout the world. As the most dangerous fruit going. Think, it's the same size and shape as an olive. When it ripens, it's a nice purplish bluish red. Can you imagine the grandchildren seeing that? Look at this nice colour. I'll tell you what, they don't even have to eat it. They picked one up and did not wash their hands thoroughly, touch their eyes, or even if they did eat one, still didn't wash their hands thoroughly and touch their eyes, or eating multiples of the finger cherry, you are blinded instantly. Yes, folks, there is no cure for it today. Some say it's the infesting fungi on the skin of the finger cherry that causes the blindness. Now, our grandparents told us, the great-grandparents even tried using breast milk to flush out the eyes, that didn't work as well. But, not only our ancestors were blinded by it as well, even colonists. Coming up here to settle Cairns, and this is in the history books throughout universities and such, they was even blinded by it too. Why, folks? Imagine settling Australia. Off the coast, say Captain Cook in the Endeavour, big ship, got his telescope. Oh, we'll go and explore this land. Coming on shore with their rations and supplies to explore our land, they didn't know we had a big backyard that went from here to Perth. As they went inland, their pack horses and such, running out of rations, they decided to double back. And it even said, they seen our ancestors picking fruits, they fired shots in the air to scare them off, they gorged themselves with the finger cherry, they were blinded also, folks. Yes. So you can imagine why grandparents did not explain. If they did, the moment their backs are turned, what do you think the grandchild would do? Curiosity and inquisitiveness. That's why they carry around this. Eyes going away. Okay? Explaining about simple things about art, folks, or like how the platypus came about, how large rivers, mountains and tributaries were formed. Most of these cultural sharings was done around a circle in the afternoon under a shade of a tree, and they would draw diagrams on the ground. But the thing is, where grandparents sat, I would sit between grandparents, my mate between another grandparents. Why?